what is a sandwich?
Me, I've always wondered about this great big universe. Those answers that are still yet to be known. What's a sandwich? Who am I? What will happen when we die? The vastness of it all can make you dreary. Fear not, it's chaotic theory. It's chaotic theory.
Welcome to Chaotic Theory. I'm Vincent.
I'm Martin. And Vincent, I've seen a lot of talk online surrounding what is a sandwich and what isn't a sandwich. We all agree, BLT, sandwich. But then, does a hot dog count as a sandwich? Is a taco a sandwich? After all, there's starch surrounding some food, but is it a sandwich?
It's an interesting question. I've pondered the idea of what is a sandwich a lot lately. I'm a big fan of sandwiches, especially sub-sandwiches, but sometimes I wonder how I classify other things. I've developed a theory to this. A sandwich is not merely a food item. However, a sandwich is a global phenomenon.
What exactly do you mean by that?
You mentioned hot dogs.
I did.
You also mentioned BLT.
That did happen.
These are different types of sandwiches. I would call a hot dog a sandwich.
Really?
I would. I'll go as far as to say a taco is a sandwich.
A taco is a sandwich.
I'll go as far as to say kebab or shawarma is a sandwich.
When it's in bread.
When it's in bread, yes.
Okay. That's a strong opinion.
Now here's the kicker though. I would say sushi is a sandwich.
Sushi is a sandwich.
Sushi is a sandwich. Sushi.
How do you justify those claims?
Hear me out. Throughout the course of history, foods have developed. The food group of putting one type of food, generally, not all the time, but generally a protein, inside of another, generally starch, has evolved over the centuries in many different countries and over different continents. Yeah. This isn't about the food item itself. It's more about the way of living.
Really?
Yes, the way of living.
See, here's the thing, Vincent. I'm a man of science. I believe in distinct formulas for sandwiches. So I'm not going to say that something's a sandwich because I believe it is or because it has that vibe to it. I want to give a strict definition for it. And the best definition of that I've found is the cube rule of sandwiches.
I found this as well.
Yes, you may have heard of it before.
I have.
You see, the rule is, imagine a cube made of a bunch of intersecting squares, flat squares.
Yes. 6.
Each of those squares, 6 of them. Each of those squares represents where the starch is in that food. And depending on where the squares are, that decides whether it's a sandwich or a taco or a bread bowl or a calzone or whatever. So, for example, a sandwich is if the starch is here and here. If it's on top and on bottom and nowhere else.
2.
Yeah, 2 of them.
Right.
So that defines a BLT as a sandwich because there's 2 slices of bread and everything else is in between. But by that logic, tacos are not sandwiches.
A taco is a taco.
A taco is a taco. The starch is on the sides, but it's also on the bottom. And by that same definition, hot dogs are also tacos, which may seem weird. Hot dogs don't seem like tacos. Sushi applies to a whole bunch of things. It definitely never came from Japan. Calzones and those like uncrustable PB&Js you used to get in elementary school are the same food by the cube rule, which may seem weird to us. It may put us off, but if we're to be men of science when it comes to sandwiches, I think that's the price we have to pay.
So you're telling me an uncrustable is a calzone, not a sandwich?
I'm telling you not only that, but a shawarma is a calzone and not a sandwich. I have strong opinions on this.
It's interesting to hear. I see where you're coming from. And my theory only works if there's 2 definitions of a sandwich. And that may sound construed or weak. However, I believe that a sandwich must be a strict, very narrow definition, but it also must be, as a food item, but it also can be sort of the cultural movement. I would say sandwich is a cultural movement. It has become the premier way of eating food, putting one item of food, generally a protein, inside another, generally a carbohydrate starch.
Okay, that is a really bold claim. People have been eating food for basically ever since people have existed. anything has been eating food since the universe existed, because stars need to, convert hydrogen to helium to exist. So to say that this is the premier new way of eating food is a very, very bold claim.
Not new. It's been around for generations.
That's true, and around the world, as you pointed out.
Yeah, and it developed simultaneously in many different countries and many different continents at the same time, at different times, without contact and with contact.
Well, but to be fair, so did, for example, dumplings. Some kind of starch spherically or otherwise in like a bag, entirely surrounding some kind of meat or vegetable. So, for example, Japan has had gyoza in the same way that South America has had empanadas. And
I would say they are all sandwiches.
You'd say they're all sandwiches.
Dumpling, empanada, it's a sandwich.
I think by the cube rule, they count as calzones.
Can we go over the cube rule again? So I've heard about this a little bit. When there's one level of starch, it is a piece of toast.
It's a toast.
It's toast.
So no matter what's on top of it, as long as there's one piece of starch and nothing else, it's a toast.
Then the second level is a sandwich.
Yeah, the sandwich is if it's both on here and here as well.
And the third level is taco.
Third level is a taco, when it's like a field goal pose.
And then 4 is sushi.
4 is sushi, when it's surrounding on all sides except for the front and the back.
5 is
a bread bowl, actually.
Bread bowl.
Yeah, because that's when the bottom's covered and all the sides are covered, but the top is empty.
I think we'll have to cover that in another video because bread bowls are an abomination to society. But
it's a strong
moving on to the 6th one, that is the calzone.
Yeah, the calzone.
So I think what we're getting at here, at least what I'm getting at here, is that the cube rule foods,
yeah,
I would say they're all sandwiches, but only the second one is the closer definition of a sandwich. So maybe the word sandwich as a grander term isn't the right word.
Here's the thing, though. I feel like most people would disagree with calling a toast a sandwich because there's only one slice of bread.
You're right. No, I wouldn't call toast a sandwich.
So that's
unless there's something on it.
Really?
Yes.
Would butter count as something on it?
If you count a butter sandwich as a sandwich, which I do, same as a ketchup sandwich, because I've heard people have said maybe it's when there's starch on the a starch carbohydrate on the outside, whether it be bread or a bun or pita, and then something on the inside, a protein. I wouldn't say that it has to be a protein, because though I only eat my sandwiches with a protein in the middle, I know stories of my ancestors when they were poorer, they had to eat ketchup sandwiches because they didn't have access to lots of food.
During the Great Depression, probably.
During the Great Depression, right. Yeah. So I think that a piece of toast with, say, jam on it is of this larger group that isn't necessarily sandwich, but it is this global movement of food.
I think when you say global movement, what you really mean is just an idea or something that's expressed in a language by a word, some concept. A theory, for example.
A chaotic theory.
A chaotic theory, one might say. Because sandwiches, I would draw a comparison to the word salsa. Salsa in Spanish means sauce. So soy sauce is a salsa, and ketchup is a salsa, and barbecue sauce is a salsa. They're all the same. But salsa in English means one thing, that sort of spicy, very Latin American sauce made of tomatoes, onions, whatever else. In the same way, I think that there are multiple types of sandwiches. There's the idea of a sandwich, which is just a food where what you're really there for is the insides, the meat, the vegetables, whatever, but it's all surrounded by some kind of starch. And then there's the specific definition of a sandwich, which is bread on top, bread on bottom, nothing else.
That's interesting. I think I do agree. What would you say that the closer definition of a sandwich, the accurate depiction that you think of two pieces of bread or a starch, does it have to have a protein in the middle?
That's a good question, because once we start shrinking the contents of the sandwich, that draws into question what a sandwich even is. You mentioned earlier that a butter sandwich might count as a sandwich. At that point, what if we take away the butter? What if we just have two slices of bread with nothing in between?
Then I would not say it's a sandwich because there's not something in the middle.
So there has to be one thing in the middle.
We can agree on that at least.
But then we get to Theseus' ship. if we take away one drop of butter, one drop of melted butter from the inside of that sandwich, it's still a sandwich, right?
Yes.
Then what if we take away 2 drops? And 3 and 4, etc. But if we take away all of them, it's not a sandwich anymore.
Right.
At what point, when we take away butter, does it stop being a sandwich?
That is an interesting query. I think that at some point, I mean, you can infinitely divide the butter until there's,
Yeah.
But at that point, I wouldn't consider it a sandwich anyways. I think that you have to have at least 50% of one side of the starch covered, or else it's just half of it is bread. So you have to have at least more than half of it be a sandwich. If that makes sense.
That does make sense.
Where there's 3 distinct layers: the bread or the starch or whatever it may be, something else, and then the starch again.
But so there need to be 3 layers for a sandwich then. But in that
There
case,
do.
that's interesting, because would you say at least 3 layers or exactly 3 layers?
I would not say exactly 3 layers, because most of my favorite sandwiches have many more than 3 layers. Take the Meat Mountain from Arby's, for example. The Meat Mountain consists of more than a dozen layers of meat and cheese
This
and
video
bread.
sponsored by Arby's.
Arby's, not a sponsor, but they could be.
Yeah.
Arby's, sponsor us.
Contact us. Yeah.
Please.
But yeah, I agree with your point about the delicious Meat Mountain from Arby's, only $4.99. But at the same time, I think it's worth pointing out a key distinction there, which is that if you say it's at least 3, because there are plenty of sandwiches, we can both agree with sandwiches with more than 3 layers, then that means that anything that cube rule, which is has more starch than a sandwich, counts as a sandwich. So a sandwich and a taco and a sushi and a dumpling or calzone or whatever, those all count as sandwiches. But that means a toast doesn't count as a sandwich, because it can have only 2 layers.
I see what you're saying.
So would buttered toast be a sandwich?
No. Now I'm saying it won't.
Really?
Yeah, you've changed my mind. 3 layers is the minimum. However, the 2 layers on the outside must be different from the middle layer. Would you agree to that?
I think I would agree with
Or
that,
else
yeah.
it's then a stack.
Yeah, because then 3 slices of bread, or for that matter, if we say that outside layers don't even have to be bread, that would just mean that fried rice, or even just a bowl of rice, is a sandwich, because you have rice on top, rice in the middle, and rice on the bottom. And I think we can agree that a bowl of rice or a bowl of soup is not a sandwich.
I can agree to that.
So, but for that matter, if we say we have a bowl where there's rice on the bottom, and then meat in the middle, and rice on the top, is that a sandwich? After all, it's a starch, something else, and then another starch.
But it's in a bowl?
It is in a bowl.
In that case, I would say no, because a sandwich has to be its own. It has to act on its own. For instance, I was at this restaurant in Pittsburgh, a famous restaurant. They don't have any plates there. It's all on paper, because the sandwiches have to act on their own. You can eat the sandwich simply on its own without having to use any utensils or cutlery, plates or bowls, any of the like.
That is an interesting point that you raise, where we're sort of developing criteria now for sandwiches, what a sandwich has to fit in order to be a sandwich. And that's one of them, the ability to be eaten and contained and entirely consumed on its own, from creation to consumption on its own, without need for a bowl, without need for any extra utensils. But then, after all, you've often seen probably in restaurants where they put a toothpick through a sandwich to hold it together. Is it
Yes.
not a sandwich anymore?
I would say no, because that at that point, the toothpick, it could be there or it couldn't be there.
Yeah.
But so you don't actually need the toothpick. It's just there for it to be easier to keep it contained. But you don't actually need it. For what you were saying earlier about it being in a bowl, you'd need the bowl
Yeah.
for that. So therefore,
Yeah,
it's not a sandwich. I think we've developed a range of criteria for this.
I think we have.
A sandwich must be independent of any bowls, plates, or cutlery.
It has to have at least 3 layers, being a starch, something else, and another starch of the same kind.
Two distinct components, at least 3 components.
So, for example, a buttered toast would not count as a sandwich, because there are only 2. However, a butter sandwich would count as a sandwich, because there's butter in the middle and 2 pieces of toast on the outside.
I think that's it.
I think we've come to a conclusion. Congratulations.
Thank you. My theory still stands of a sandwich being a cultural movement that occurred at different times in different places globally. But I think we've reached a conclusion on what the sandwich food item is.
I agree.
Let us know in the comments, what do you think is a sandwich? And what is your favorite sandwich?
For me, it's Arby's meat.
We'll see you next week. Okay, that's it.
That's it.
Does it look good?
Yeah, it looks good.